Hey team, welcome to those of you who are already watching here with us this afternoon. We're here to chat today about some topics and a crossover, of course, of the building world and the world of on the X medicine. So today we have obviously a special guest who essentially initiated this, and that of course is Richard. We'll get into meeting him in just a sec, but I'll introduce myself first. To those of you who don't know me, my name's Simon. I'm the director of PracMed NZ, a first aid company here who is revolutionising and changing the game by going through and teaching people lessons learned on the battlefield, now translated into civilian terms, real first aid. Before we go any further, Richard, who are you? What are you all about? What is Living Improvements?
Oh, yeah. So my name's Richard, obviously. I've only been building for about 6 years, so I'm not a super experienced carpenter, but done a bunch of different stuff, and yeah, been working for myself and with other people for the last sort of 6 years, and learning as I go. But and yeah, I mean, do I get into the story now?
Yeah, 100%, man. So obviously there's a reason why you're here. There's a reason why we've kind of crossed paths and stuff like that. And I think this has been a really good opportunity. Obviously, in terms of primary industry, I have very, very little to do with that sector and stuff. And so having somebody, even though you discount yourself immediately of saying that you haven't had much experience there, man, you have a wealth of experience on top of what I've got. And especially when it comes to obviously seeing and recognizing some of the injuries and stuff like that you guys have commonly, and some of the more uncommon ones on work sites. So why don't you go ahead and let us know why you reached out and why we're here today?
Yeah, so I've done a couple of relatively decent first aid courses. I did one. I used to work for AJ Hackett Bungee 10 or 15 years ago, and we did a pretty substantial first aid course then, and more than just your average one. I don't know what the average one is, but it felt like pretty decent. And I put that to use one time. Guy had been hit on the side of the road, and just having that knowledge that I learned from that course, which was just keep calm and obviously analyse the situation and make sure everyone's safe and all that sort of stuff, was really useful in that instance. And then recently, I think maybe last year, I want to say it was a St John course. It was with a bunch of other tradies. And we did it was probably 4 or 5 hour or full day course. And again, pretty decent. But then about a week ago, had an incident with a young kid who cut himself really bad going through a window. And the reason I instantly jumped into getting in touch with people that follow me on social media and stuff, and letting them know kind of what happened and that they need more than your average first aid course, more than your average first aid kits, is because I realised that the injury he had was more substantial than what I'd learnt to deal with in a first aid course. First aid course is really good. It covers a broad range of things, and people not breathing, but the whole thing, resuscitation, all that sort of stuff. But I kind of realised that on a building site, probably the majority of injuries or a very common injury is going to be a very serious cut or trauma or something. And the average bandages that I'd pull out of one of my 3 or 4 first aid kits just weren't going to cut the mustard for the incident that we had. And I had, because I'd seen a guy on YouTube say that everyone should have one, I had a tourniquet, which I'd bought a cheap one from China on AliExpress, and I showed that, and I said, people should have these tourniquets, and I instantly got these messages being like, mate, you shouldn't have this cheap Chinese one. You can only do this and that. You shouldn't use it unless you know what you're doing. And I realised that I needed to upskill, buy more products that could actually save someone's life. And so that's when I decided, well, one way that I'd try and motivate people to go out and to do these first aid, upskill their first aid, and to buy the proper equipment that might be the thing that saves someone's life, was to do a bit of a giveaway, and reached out to a few companies, and PracMed was one of them, and then they came back with this idea, and I was like, this is awesome, because not only are we directing people to a place to buy good equipment and the right equipment, but also to enlighten people and a few tips and tricks on what they might need.
Yeah, 100%, man. And thank you very much for reaching out to us. I think, there's some really, really good stuff out there in terms of people coming through, jumping on top of it straight away, identifying shoddy kit, having the intestinal fortitude to turn around and say, hey, we shouldn't be using that because ultimately they'll fail. And we'll definitely kind of talk about that and cover that off later on in the kind of chat that we've got. But it's not limited to tourniquets as well. And this is also where, real life situations where you hit with something which is really significant with regards to traumatic injury, people look at that and they're like, oh my gosh, my stuff inside of my, regular compliance first aid kit maybe isn't working so much. So that's a really good introduction. Hopefully we can go through and kind of help some people out, make a bit of an informed decision today. What today's really going to be about is building people up. So one of the things I'm very anti about is just completely, for a lack of better terms of reference, shitting on people's experiences and stories and stuff like that. This is about education. This is about getting the message out there, the right message, instead of simply just the compliance message of clipping the ticket and, rocking around the place with a little piece of paper. Because as we all know, in the real world, that doesn't work. For those of you who are out there listening, thank you very much for engaging already. Just to give you guys a bit of a heads up as well, we will be taking live comments. We will be taking anything that you guys want answered towards the first aid topics. Okay, I know some people can get a little silly on it, but as we go through, if you've got a question, if you've got something that you want answered, clarified, whatever else, just shoot and we'll do our best to go through and square that away. So go through, feel free to share this thing, feel free to like it, and yeah, again, drop those comments on board. What I think we'll cover off first is just go through probably what I consider the top three or the number or the number one mistakes that people make that I've seen personally from a civilian perspective. Also, just running around the place, everyday life. It's not just restricted to building sites, of course, where trauma can affect us. So the three that I've got here, I've written them down, is first of all, hiding injuries with towels or shirts. And this is something that I see a ton of, is people going through just trying to basically put a towel or a dishcloth or, ripping the shirt off and putting it up over somebody who's bleeding significantly. What people need to understand is that, look, if you have a injury which is largely musculoskeletal, which has got no real vascular tissue involved or vascular compromise involved, you might get away with that. You might get away with it. It might hide it. You're not really going to control the bleeding as such. It's more kind of just going to absorb it, but the bleeding is not going to be that significant. If you do that with a significant arterial bleed, the person is going to bleed to death. It is as simple as that, because towels, because tea towels, because shirts, because jackets, all that stuff simply does not control the bleed if it is simply applied over the top of that arterial passage in most cases. The second one that we've got is believing compliance kits will cover you for injuries. And this is something that obviously you've gone through, that you've recognized, Richard. And I think that's really, really, really cool that you've gone out off your own back with your own initiative, sought out and bought yourself a TQ, commonly known as tourniquet. The Americans say it tourniquet. I love it. I don't know why, it just sounds cooler. And basically, you've invested in that. And I think that's really important. But, going through and understanding that compliance kits don't cut the mustard. Now, this is something that I harp on a lot about. I'm not going to go on about it too much today. You guys make your own mind up as we go through. And we're definitely going to go through and obviously offer up some equipment at the end of this as well, because I think knowledge is one thing, making sure you've got some equipment is the other. And Richard, you can do whatever you want with that. You can give it away to however you kind of see as we go through. So the third one I've got here is not knowing what's inside of kits. And this is probably the worst bit. And this applies to everybody. A lot of people come through, and it's not just the civilians or the prepared people. This applies to everybody out there. All levels. I see them stocking up on a bunch of stuff. But one thing that really kind of irks me is people not understanding placement inside of their kits. Now, the stuff that we make it in a system and a process as such. So it starts at worst and goes through the least, or in the most appropriate manner. Getting down the skin real quick, being able to expose the injury, covering yourself up with gloves, applying TQ if required, packing gauze, bandages, chest seals, all the rest of it, right through to obviously managing hypothermia at the end when everything's said and done. To kind of learn about that, I can't fit that into 1 hour. That's why we don't run a 1 hour or 2 hour course. It's got to be on a at minimum, so we can go through that. But know what's inside your kit, know what kind of kit you're carrying, and make sure you don't just go ahead and just place towels over the top of things, because at the end of the day, that's just going to hide it. It's not going to stop it. So that's very, very important. What we're going to do now is go through, and we kind of put a shout out there earlier in the week to say, and I know you did this as well, Rich, so we're going to hit some things that you've kind of brought up here, and I'm going to let you take the lead with this. It's going to be awesome. Going through, and we asked people to send through different kind of stories, different anecdotes, photos if they wanted to and if they could, about different injuries and kind of situations they've had on building sites and work sites. Just a bit of a heads up, and I'm going to say this a couple of times just so you guys are squared away. This viewer discretion advised. There is some fairly significant injuries that are going to be posted through here. These are real injuries. These are things which happen to people. So if you're not cool with looking at that stuff, you're probably on the wrong channel for a start, and second of all, just a heads up anyway. So viewer discretion advice is going to be a bit of stake hanging out. So what we'll go through now is I'll get you introduce our first one here, and we'll go through and we'll have a look. As you're describing it, I'll go through and I'll bring up the photo. But yeah, if you want to go through,
I'll just quickly jump back. The other reason I kind of felt like this was really important as well is because, and I didn't mention it, the ambulance took an hour to come. And I think you kind of think like it's like the movies, this thing's going to arrive in 15 minutes. And obviously it depends on what other incidents are happening out there as to how many trucks are available. And it was rush hour on Thursday afternoon. So that's going to add more time. So we were an hour. So that made me think, shit, you need to be able to deal with this thing yourself, because if it was more serious and he was bleeding out, then he obviously wasn't going to last an hour. The second thing was so I'm going to discuss, there was a towel around his arm when I came across the scene, and on both arms, and one I could tell was worse. But I was on the phone to the lady, and it was a very confused conversation, because I've had these couple of courses. I felt really confident about the situation, and I was calm, and I knew that one of the important things to do was really assess what the injury was, so you know what the level is, how important this is, how serious it is. And she was asking me on the phone, how bad is this other injury? And I was like, well, I can't see it. It's got a towel wrapped around it. I'm trying to have a look. And she was like, well, don't put the phone down. And I was trying to tell her, well, I can't see it unless I put the phone down and have a look. And she was like, well, don't take the towel off it. And it was such a confused situation. I knew that from my training that I was actually doing the right thing, trying to assess it, obviously not trying to open anything up and make it worse. But, she didn't know whether I should be assessing it or staying on the phone. And in the end, I just had to put the phone down. So, yeah, that was the other thing. I realised that actually, as much as she was trying to help, she was actually making it worse for someone who had a bit of knowledge and was calmly dealing with the situation. So, yeah, and he did have a towel around him, and it was lucky, they said later on, that it was lucky that the arterial bleed that he did have had clogged itself. So it was, a bit of a lucky situation.
100%. And just real quick on that as well, man, I totally agree. Ambulance services are under a massive amount of strain and pressure at the moment. Obviously, there's all the issues which have been publicized pretty well in the media and stuff like that. And I think, if you expect an ambulance to get on top of you, even 15 minutes can be way too long, depending on where you're hit and hurt. We're going to see some of the injuries that we're going to see today, give it a few mils left or right, and 15 minutes is going to be too long. It's as simple as that. So we'll definitely break that down. Now, we've had a couple of comments jump on here. So I just want to say, hey to Patrick there. He's given us the shucker and the hey boys, and good on us from Reagan as well. Now, Dylan's popped in here as well, and he said, why are TQs the only thing people talk about? What about stopping bleeds where a TQ can't? We're going to be talking about that later on today as well, and totally agree with you, Dylan. There's no one piece of equipment which does absolutely everything. So, yeah, completely agree with you there. Brandon, absolutely agree that people don't build the correct layers and kits because most courses don't train this way, and that brings a massive point. It's all good. You can have one training, but without kit, you're pretty much useless. With kit, without training, you're also going to be pretty useless. And without mindset in the third aspect of that kind of triangle, you're just kind of wasting your time as well. So, yeah, totally agree. Anyway, guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you for dropping a comment in. Make sure that you do, if you do have something that you want to ask, we'll talk about as we go through. So let's talk about it. Let's go through and let's have a look at some of these scenarios we've got here. The first one here, do you want to rattle that off and let us know what we're dealing with?
This is through Instagram from a follower. This is from guy James Bear Joinery. And I thought this was an interesting one because it was just like, it was nothing that like the one next door, I didn't expect how bad an injury could be around the home from putting your arm through a window. This is another one that was such a surprise that it was even a possible injury. And he's a concreter, and he said he was deep. I don't know the exact details, but he was deep in concrete, doing a job which he'd done heaps of times before. And he had, I guess, like waterproof pants or whatever he's wearing. But the alkaline water in the cement ate through the stitching on my waterproof, spread into my Snickers work trousers. I felt nothing apart from the stones on my knees. After getting the concrete leveled off and rubbed up, I hosed down and tidied up, jumped in the van and pulled my waterproofs off to find my trousers soaking wet, and wondered why I couldn't feel that my trousers were wet. He pulled them off to drive home in his undies and found like two massive horseshoe bruises or black, kind of marks around his knees, and they turned out to be chemical burns from obviously the alkaline water. And so then you've got the photos of that, and it was pretty gnarly. I was just like, wow, I didn't know you'd get an injury from concrete.
Yeah, 100%. So let's go through and let's have a look at that as well. So again, viewer discretion advised. We're going to go through, have a look at the actual injury itself first, and then we'll go through and just have a look at the, there's two photos here. One of him inside the actual hospital. So you can see there the extent of the burns. Now, obviously, that's inside of a hospital environment. That's all dressed up and so on. And the right-hand leg, you can see there is quite compromised with full thickness burns, left to a degree as well. But when we have a look at the actual injury undressed, again, viewer discretion advised, when we go through and look at that, that is really, really significant burns. And when this was first sent through, there was no mechanism of injury when I first heard of it. And I was sitting there, I was trying to work it out. I was sitting there, I was trying to look at it, I was going, man, has he slipped on something? Is there a piece of roofing iron? What's kind of happened here? So, yeah, that's, the profile of the injury didn't make much sense to me. So, yeah, again, that's a pretty interesting one to have come through. So when we look at any kind of chemical burns and stuff like that, especially anything which is involved with, that commercial side of the house, I think the first thing that we need to do is recognize that has to be dealt with as obviously it's a chemical burn injury, but it has to be dealt with as per your safety data sheet or SDS. That's obviously a requirement. That's something which is needed on site, and it takes the guesswork out of things. Now, PPE will get you so far. An accident is an accident for a reason, and without that kind of knowledge sitting right in front of you, you're going to be losing 9 times out of 10. And obviously, what we see here is a bit of complacency. I don't know whether it was with the PPE or whatever else, and we found ourselves, in a position where he's gotten chemical between the layers there. Now, this is something which I've certainly heard of before as well, with guys going through and having stuff fill up their gum boots and whatnot, and it's a real nightmare. Anything chemical is really bad news. So my advice for that is have your SDS squared away and be relentless with your PPE in terms of covering up with the boots and stuff like that. So very, 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 very important to go through and get that squared away. Okay, so yeah, pretty gnarly. Obviously, a long stay in hospital, probably some skin grafts going down range there and stuff like that. And hopefully, he came back online with a bit of a bit of recovery and recovered quite well. So yeah, hopefully that came back online. The next one we've got as well. Now, this is a really interesting one, and this is one which kind of ties in a little bit with what we're talking about before, and the reason why we do talk about tourniquet a lot on these kind of episodes, on these kind of shows and stuff like that. And that's because extremity injuries overwhelmingly are what we're seeing in terms of people on construction sites, and also used to be the leading cause of preventable death on the battlefield as well, until they came in and started mass producing commercial tourniquets. So yeah, let's talk about the next one here. So the next one is, I'll let you go through it, Richard, and kind of give us the rundown of what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, so the next one was somebody. This was the old friend of a friend, or his friend, the guy who messaged me. It was his friend, and he said that I'm assuming it was a while ago, and maybe it was a skill saw didn't have the same shields that they have now, or maybe even still it could do this, but basically had a skill saw. He'd done the cut. It was still spinning, and he went to put it down. And as he put it down, he obviously put it down pretty close to him, and it caught the fabric of his trousers, and then just ran across the top of his leg. And I think he said it. I think he mentioned it cut down to the bone. And it was, he quickly wrapped something around it and went to get his wife to, help him, and obviously either drive him to the hospital or whatever. And his wife saw it and fainted, and then so she was out of the picture. So I thought it was a good one, because it does show that you might think, oh yeah, I'm good, I've got someone here that can help me, but you get the wrong person and they pass out. They're not like that.
Oh, 110%, man. That's massive. I mean, first of all, if you've got somebody there, that's great. They can help you out. That's awesome. But when it comes to the crunch, man, only 5% of New Zealand's population train in first aid annually. And I mean, that's absolutely crazy, but that's the reality of what we're dealing with in terms of statistics. And out of that 5%, not all courses and certainly not all instructors are created equal. When you look at the syllabus, and how it kind of reflects against the different unit standards or whatever else, hemorrhage control, bleeding control is virtually non-existent. And that's why we exist. That's why we're here. And that's why we do what we do, because we're so sick and tired of, this topic being breezed over. Now, with regards to what you've just brought up, across the top of the quad, that's a injury. I've seen quite a few injuries which I guess are kind of similar, and typically what we're looking at here is a lot of damage to the skin and muscle tissue, sometimes the bone as well, a lot of musculoskeletal damage, but not much vascular damage. Now I'm going to bring up a photo here, or a diagram here, and this is of the vascular system within the body. The red indicates the arterial passageway, the blue indicates the venous return system. So if we think about it like this, the arterial system takes oxygenated blood away from the heart, introduces that to various tissues and makes sure that they can function, and then carries back through the venous system, or the blue system, and that comes back through. The easiest way to look at this is basically the arterial system, or the red system, is generally quite deep lying, and I say generally, and it is also a high pressure system, which means that it's a lot harder to control. So the next photo, or the next diagram I'm going to bring up here, is basically of the upper leg and also the pelvis. You can see it there. We've got obviously some muscle tissue, which is indicated by the red granular kind of stuff in this artist's impression. We have yellow there, which is nerve tissue or nerves, and then we have the red indicating arterial and the blue indicating venous. So those are the major arteries, or the major artery and the major vein, which is running down the inside of the femur there. And on the outside, you can see there is very little with regards to vascular tissue. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not going to bleed, but what this means is that you can have a lot of damage, you can have a lot of visual impact as such. If somebody looks at an injury like that and goes, oh my gosh, he's going to bleed to death, and it just might not be the case at all. Okay, depending on where the strike site is, seen some really, really gnarly injuries where people have had like their legs hanging open and half off and whatnot, and there is no need to panic. There is no need to drop a tourniquet on or pack out the wound or anything like that. There's just no requirement for it. So, going through and identifying the wound, like you said before, removing the towel and having a look and seeing, hey, is it spraying out everywhere? Is there a pulsing? Is there a squirting, which indicates an arterial bleed, or is it just flowing out, or is it simply just a drizzle? Let's try and remove the emotion from looking at it. Just because there's a bit of skin and muscle damage, people can get really, really wrapped up in that. So I think that's a really important thing to do, and understand there is a big difference between musculoskeletal damage and, of course, vascular trauma as well, or musculoskeletal trauma and vascular trauma. So that's a huge thing to jump on. And obviously, this is now when we start looking at kit and equipment. I'm going to introduce a couple of bits and pieces here for you guys as we kind of run through. Richard, you've kind of talked about already the use of the tourniquet. This is something that we kind of promote here as well, is certainly the use of the tourniquet. That's for good reason. Obviously, it's a massive, massive, massive part of going through and assisting in preventing preventable deaths on the battlefield, but also has been used a lot in the civilian sector as well. So, we can go through and we can have a look at this very, very quickly. I'm going to bring this up, but this is a table of approved tourniquets, and it's something which basically goes through. This is developed, these are the results which are put through from the Council of Tactical Combat Casualty Care, which is a US DoD funded organization which tests and makes sure different products are up to the mark of going through and getting themselves squared away and doing their job. And as you can see, there's two there which stand out. One of them, of course, is the cat tourniquet, which a lot of people are quite familiar with, and there is a ton of knockoffs out there of these things as well. Here's a real one. This is a live one. Very hard to distinguish these days between one of these and the fakes out there as well. I'm not going to go on about that too much. We've got articles which we have on the Facebook page and stuff like that where you can go through and have a look at that. And then, of course, we have the soft tourniquet here as well. And that is something that, hey, if you hang around, if you stay tuned, you might be into potentially grab yourself one of those. So hang around. The soft tourniquet has certainly grown on me as of late. This is one which is made by TACMed Solutions US. Okay, it's a very simple system. And honestly, this has grown on me massively as of late, simply because of how comfortable it is. This thing is unbelievably comfortable, and also its ability to be applied and then it's almost impossible to remove it from a casualty's perspective once it is applied. Now, something you got to understand if you are applying a tourniquet is that these things are extremely painful, especially for like the first kind of, minute to a minute and a half sort of thing. The nerves are going absolutely ballistic and stuff. This one is probably the most comfortable tourniquet that I've used as opposed to the cat. On our courses, we go through, we put them on each other, we put them on live, and there's good reason for that. If you know what it feels like, then you can understand and also preempt what somebody who's having one of these applied to them may do. And in some cases, people can become combative when they have a tourniquet applied. So comfort, even though it may seem like the most ridiculous thing in the entire world. I mean, if somebody's legs half hanging off whatever else, you'd think that they have bigger problems. But yeah, believe me when I say it, these things can cause people to become quite combative. So some of the really important things with tourniquet use is that when you go through and you use them is to ensure that you, first of all, train with it properly, make sure that you store it properly, and maintain it. It's just like any other piece of equipment. Now, when it comes to tourniquet use, the actual use of the tourniquet itself, some of the common mistakes that we see is people simply haven't squared away that you need to have the tourniquet pulled back into where the windlass feeds through whatever kind of system it uses. If you have a ton of slack like this, that is simply going to cause you problems, okay? So making sure the tourniquet is nice and kind of flush inside of the windlass backplate. From there, it becomes really, really, really simple, okay? And it's about getting the tourniquet onto your arm wherever you desired. You wanted to get it on and getting on a nice tight bite. And as you can see there, I put it over the top of skin, not clothing, and that's something which is very, very, very important as well. And from there, going through in that nice tight bite will get you a very easy process of occlusion where all you have to go through and do is wind the windlass until the bleeding stops. Now, some of the myths and rumors, there it is, done. Some of the myths and rumors that we hear with these things is things like fat cells needing to pop and, you need to, spin it until you hear the fat crackling and whatnot. And I can't think of anything more ridiculous. It is very simple. Tighten until the blood flow stops, and generally that is with the soft tourniquet. You're looking at a complete turn, maybe with the cat tourniquet a half a turn. As you can see, there is the buckle system here. I can no longer go through and functionally pull that off or anything like that. So if somebody does become combative, that doesn't become an issue. You also see that there's a little time tab on the end of the TQ here. That is there for a good reason. Make sure that you write the time on there. That's going to assist the doctors back through ED, make a decision about how they're going to remove that TQ, if they're going to remove it, whatever else, okay? So don't be worried about loosening it off or anything. One of these things goes on at basic life support level. Once it goes on, it stays on, okay? Just leave it where it is. If you're better trained than that, if you know better than that, and if you're in a capacity where you can go through and convert the tourniquet, hey, good for you, okay? This conversation is probably not for you, but that for those of you who are listening who use tourniquet in a basic life support setting / first aid setting, okay, this is where it's at. So yeah, that's the soft tourniquet. Like I said, incredibly painless to actually use it. Great bit of kit. Does every injury require the use of a tourniquet though? And the short answer is no. So going through, if you do use a tourniquet, I mean, there is a chance that the person could lose the limb and stuff like that. And that's just due to tissue necrosis, because obviously this completely occludes or completely shuts all of the blood vessels going through past that point. Now, if that's left on there outside of that kind of 2-hour mark, then, you could be losing the limb, but at the end of the day, life over the limb. It's very, very simple in that sense. So yeah, that's the tourniquet. But if we don't need to use a tourniquet, and the injury is still a little more significant than what you consider your average scratch, or required to use a regular plaster or whatever else, then you may need to look at bandaging. For bandaging, this is something which is very, very poorly taught. Now, I'm going to ask you here, Richard. I mean, have you ever opened a brand new bandage from the packet to go through and use on a course, for example?
Yeah, I can recall.
Yeah, cool. So
I have it. It's been like a really basic bandage, not like not like the Israeli bandage or.
Yeah, cool. No dramas, and that's something we need to talk about as well. So we've got the emergency bandage here, or the Israeli, as it used to be known back in the day, for all those salty boys out there watching this thing, okay? But there's emergency bandage. This is a 4-inch variant. This is a great piece of equipment. There's a bunch of different compression dressings out there. There's the Oleast, you've got H&H. There's a whole bunch of them. This is the one that I'm most common with anyway, or most familiar with. We're going to go through and kind of have a look at it. This is something that we use on every one of our courses as well, and we teach people brand new out of the packet how to use it. Start looking at a bit of stress inoculation there as well. So I'm going to run you through real quick one of the advantages here and the aspects of the bandage. So yeah, basically outside packet that gets open, and you've got your inside packet here. Okay, it's got the inside packet kind of mirrors the outside packet, so you've got these little tear tabs that you can kind of see there. I'll splay it out. There we go. Okay, so those little tear tabs that you see there, they have a little incision in them. If you try and rip the bandage from this end or whatever else, good luck. These are super compressed, very, very difficult to get in, sterilized. There are knockoffs of this bandage which are floating around the place. Now, the problem with that is, A, they don't meet any standard, any official standard, even though they might have CE printed on it or whatever else. They don't meet that standard. Persis Medical is the only company who's allowed to, well, they own the patent to these things, so they're the only ones who produce these. Great bit of kit, and I'm going to show you exactly why very, very, very soon. So a lot of you have gone through and probably used roll bandages in the past and stuff like that, and found it incredibly difficult to use these on yourself, maybe, or on your buddy or whatever else. And the reason why the emergency bandage is such a great bit of kit, especially for the tradies, especially for hunters, especially for people out there running around the place who may need to use this without the assistance or the expertise of somebody else, is because as soon as you pop these bad boys open, what you'll see is that A, they don't run away on you because they've got a little stitch which goes all the way through. Okay, there it is. And B, on this end here, where the loop is on the end, you can go through, shove your arm through. Okay, so you got that through, and then all you have to do is position the little sticker over top of the wound. Okay, and that will come into play exactly the reason why in a second. I'm just going to move that around. Okay, if we had the injury there, alrighty, all we've got to do now is pull the bandage around, twist 90 degrees through. Okay, and that is a pressure bar on top. And then you can see the sticker just below the bandage through there. As soon as I pull that back around, the pressure bar digs into the actual sticker, and that is what creates the pressure. So that's how that works, because what we need to understand is that pressure, and I mean good pressure, is what wins the war against bleeding. It's not about just dumping a towel on top. It's not just about dumping a shirt on top. That is simply going to soak things up. These bandages are where it's at with regards to point and direct pressure on top of a wound. Great for instance where you see kind of light trauma to skin, or small penetrating trauma, or an area that we want to deliver a lot of pressure, maybe even over the top of a packing dressing or whatever else. Okay, great bit of kit for that kind of stuff. So the 4 inches where it's at, as far as I'm concerned, it does a lot of really, really good things as well. You can bandage up other areas, junctional injuries. Who was it? I think it was Dylan brought that up before. So yeah, Dylan Ackley jumped in and he said, no one ever carries packing or airway. And yeah, I think that's really, really important, especially the packing side of the house is super important, because when we look at areas like the groin or the armpit, shoulder area, auxiliary pocket, or the neck, we need to know how to go through and pack into those areas, because you know what, maybe putting a dressing over the top of it is not going to prevent the cavitation of the wound from being filled, and that is not going to stop the bleed. It's as simple as that.
Is packing, if you've got to open something that you pack inside it?
Yeah, 100%. So when we talk about the body, once again, on limbs, it's and again, I can't break it fully down. We only have a limited amount of time here, but when we look at packing, we're looking at shoulders, or sorry, we're looking at the junctional areas we cannot use tourniquets, areas that are not going to be, or the injury profile is not suitable for simply dumping compression dressing over the top of. So what we're talking about here is basically creating pressure inside of the wound cavity against the flow or against the vascular damage to control the bleed enough so that you just simply don't expire or leak out, and hopefully create a bit of a clot by obviously managing or putting that packing inside of the wound there. So that's very important to understand. Now, from junctional hemorrhage and stuff like that, I off the top of my head, I think it's around about 16%, and that is very rough. Okay, so I will update that after this, but I think it's around about 16%. Of all battlefield injuries, junctional or preventable death from battlefield injuries from junctional injuries. But in terms of when we go through and we look at using that in the civilian sector, there's been a couple instances, and that kind of leads us on to where we're going next with the next example as well. So those of you watching out there hopefully enjoyed the kind of demonstration of the TACMed Solutions USA soft tourniquet, or Special Operations Forces tourniquet, and of course the what was formerly known as the Israeli dressing, now known as the emergency bandage. And I've got a question here, actually. This is something I'm going to address because it's actually on topic. This one's here from Patrick, and that is, would you use a tourniquet and an Israeli bandage at the same time if you're waiting for an ambulance? And the answer is, yeah, absolutely. So would I use a tourniquet to control a massive bleed? Yeah, of course I would. Yeah, 100%. So if there's massive bleeding from a limb, I look at that and I think, gosh, there's absolutely no way I'm going to be able to control that with a bandage. We're just going to dump a TQ on straight away. Then the bandage comes into play, not necessarily from the hemorrhage control perspective, but for probably largely the psychological effect in a civilian setting. You don't want to be sitting there and looking at your own steak hanging out. But also from the perspective of going through and managing any kind of foreign body, any additional injury occurring to that person, whatever else, get a bandage over the top, make sure it's kind of closed off and stuff. And of course, nerves don't like air either. So yeah, it's only going to help the person out, in terms of the long run. So yes, I would. Okay, obviously the main consideration is always going to be making sure that the blood doesn't come out of the body, but then of course covering that injury up is pretty important too. So yeah.
Just on that note, it kind of what you were talking about made me think about the incident that we had, and actually I think the towel was almost more for us as like not having to see the injury. It was a little bit out of sight, out of mind when it was covered up by a towel. So it was wrapped up in a towel. And we're like, okay, we wait for the ambulance, but like you say, hiding it doesn't actually help fix the problem or give you a chance to really assess.
Yeah, 110%. If we've got somebody who we know is bleeding and we know is in a bit of trouble or what have you, it's very important to get down to skin and actually assess that injury. Now, glass cuts, glass injuries are massive. My experience with my first arterial bleed that I managed with on a human was on a guy who'd been through a window. There was 2 arterial bleeds and a lot of other lacerations, which involved a lot of muscular trauma as well, skin tissue and muscle trauma as well. And they were horrible. Without removing the clothing, without removing whatever's covering up over the top of it, you're pretty much doomed. You may miss tiny little holes. And we teach us on the course is once we identify that somebody's bleeding, you got to get down to skin real quick. And there's a number of ways you can do that. I mean, personally, I carry a Benchmade 7 hook. I had to use it just over a month ago on a massive T-bone, which happened 7 minutes away from my house here. And getting down the skin real quick, getting belts off and stuff like that is so.
What's the hook? What's that hook? What is that?
So it's basically a safety hook which you can use to get down to skin very, very quickly, as opposed to strap cutters and so on. And some people think that strap cutters are an acceptable tool. What I'd say is be very careful with that. I've been made aware of a number of incidents now where people have used combat speed, or gone through very quickly, exposing people's injuries, end up actually causing the person injury because of catching skin. The safety hook, which I carry, the only areas which I've managed to find that I could potentially cut myself are places like just under the earlobe there, and little finger and stuff like that. If you put it on the collar of somebody's shirt and just pull down, it cuts through like a hot knife through butter. And so far, the only thing which it's managed to be defeated by has been a set of chainsaw chaps, which if it made it through those, then I don't know. You're dealing with a friggin' lightsaber or something. I don't know, but yeah, great bit of kit. So there's that. You've got trauma shares, and then you got ripple tear. Doesn't matter. You need to get down to skin, and there's another big reason for that as well, which we might talk about a little bit later. But right now, should we move on maybe to number 3? And this is where we start looking at trauma involving kind of more junctional areas, and also penetrating trauma involving foreign bodies which are still embedded into people. So again, viewer discretion, especially if you've just joined us. Rich, do you want to bring us on to number 3 now?
Oh, 3. This is someone that you've experienced right now.
Okay,
yeah.
So this one fell into our DMs. All right. What I'm going to do is basically describe or bring up what happened here. Yeah, sorry, you're quite right. Okay, so this one here, and this one came through to us, and I looked at this and wow, I've seen some foreign bodies before, but this one impressed me. So this one was doing some rough cutting, going through a circular saw. Basically, a board exploded inside of the saw itself, and it splintered. There was a large piece of splinter. You're going to see the splinter in just a second. It's not actually inside of the person, but it is outside of the person after it was removed, obviously, into the groin area, missing the femoral artery by around about 5 mils or a half centimeter. Casualty was driven to the hospital approximately 30 meters away. Okay, 30 minutes away. Forgive me for that. And this is what was sticking inside of the casualty's leg there. So you can see that is massive. I mean, that is over or around what, 9 centimeters, whatever it is. Plus, okay, that is a huge piece of wood in there. And like I said before, some of the smallest holes can create the biggest problems. We're going to have a look at some other kind of injury as such very soon. But that piece of wood which has gone through, I mean, that's gone in super deep as well. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be a military setting. It doesn't have to be from an explosive force or anything like that. This is literally from somebody cutting stuff up at their house, and that's landed inside the groin there. Now, before we go on any further and we talk about how we treat that, I just want to go back and have a look at the anatomy here again. Now, when you have a look through the pelvis or through the groin area, on this diagram, there is a lot of complex, and this is a very, very basic diagram. Through the pelvis, that is an incredibly complex area to go through and manage any kind of bleeding in, obviously because of the inability to apply a lot of really good direct pressure. So in that groin area through there, that just causes massive, massive, massive problems. So yeah, what can you do about groin injuries? What can you do about injuries where you obviously cannot use a tourniquet, where you obviously can't go through and manage it through just putting on a dressing over the top of? Maybe that's not going to be good enough. That's when we start looking at things like wound packing. So this is wound packing here. This one's just a straight up, and this is designed specifically for that. This is a packet of S-roll gauze, North American Rescue S-roll gauze. And this is probably one of the best things that you can have. Now, there's other ones out there like Celox and Quick Clot, and there's various hemostatic agents out there. That is something that, please, if you are carrying any of the granular stuff, throw it in the bin right now. It's a big thing with the pig hunters out there and stuff. And then somebody's selling it here in New Zealand. I don't know who it is, but maybe a couple of places selling these granules, and they just don't understand what they're doing with this stuff. Distal thrombosis caused by these kind of products are huge. Okay, so that's coming out, and I mean it's always been there. Also, the other thing you need to factor in is that if you're bleeding arterially, or got an arterial bleed going on, and you pour a packet of this stuff in, what do you think is going to happen? It's just going to wash out. Again, it's about creating good and proper pressure into that wound cavity to make sure that that person doesn't expire or continue to free bleed. Okay, it's about creating that clotting cascade going in. So that's very, very, very important. So I'm going to show you very, very quickly as well now. We've got a video here. This one shows a little bit of an injury, and there's a little bit of bleeding with it and stuff like that. So again, if you suck at looking at this kind of stuff, one, you're on the wrong show. Two, okay, viewer discretion advised. So yeah, you might want to turn away. This is the reason why we want to leave foreign bodies in, and why, in this case here, case study number 3 was absolutely correct about leaving that foreign body in. So we're going to have a look at this video. You can see it there. This is just from a nail, okay, just from a tiny little nail. Whoa, okay, there we go. And you can clearly see, I mean, that's an arterial bleed. For those of you who have not seen an arterial bleed before on a person, that is what you're dealing with. And that is a tiny little compromise there. I mean, that nail was obviously compromised, probably by the looks of the positioning near the radial artery. The radial artery is on the inside of the thumb, typically where people find, a general pulse point. That's gone through, compromised that artery, and can see how far it shoots out. So you can imagine at such a distal point, and when I say distal, that is further from the heart or towards the fingertips or the toe tips, away from the heart, you can see that that could cause massive, massive issues as we get further back up towards the proximal points, i.e. In the shoulder, under the armpit, on the inside of the legs, where your arterial passages are a lot bigger. Okay, remember, that's a high pressure system. That's very, very hard to control. So something, a bit of food for thought there. Definitely something to consider anyway. Cool. So basically, what we can go through and do now is move on from that. Again, I would love to go through and teach you guys how to pack here. We only have about like 8 minutes left, and we're probably going to blow out over an hour, so whatever. But I'd love to show you guys how to wound pack here and stuff like that. But seriously, come and jump on and do it on the course, man. Everybody goes through and does it, every course that we teach. So that's just so important to me to make sure that people get their hands on time. There was a real quick question here from Isaiah May. Cheers for all the info so far. Can you let us know where to get those soft TQ bandages and wound packing and safety hook from? Look, this is going to sound like a bit of self-promotion here, but yeah, very simply, it's from us, pracmednz.com. Go through, jump on there. We also have a promo for you guys as well. I'll just have to check that out soon. Please just hold the phone with purchasing anything, because we're going to drop you guys 15%. Anybody who's watching, 15% discount straight off the bandages straight away. So yeah, jump in and get onto that. But yeah, we're the ones who supply the soft TQ here in NZ. So yeah, jump across, have a look at that. Great bit of kit, and yeah, certainly genuine products, and that's something that we're massive on as well. So thank you for the question there, Isaiah. What we might move on to now is number 4. Now, this is a really interesting injury, and this is one from a number of years ago, which is, very, very interesting, and one that is not thought about a lot. And I'm going to bring up the photo straight away. So again, viewer discretion advised. This one here is of penetrating chest trauma. And this one was from a student of ours who went through, did the course. A few weeks after he did the course, his father was working on some industrial machinery not far away from where we are now. Basically, a catastrophic failure led through to the machine having a splinter of high tensile steel as such came off it and penetrated in next to the left-hand side of his sternum there, and presented with what can only be described as a sucking chest wound or penetrating chest trauma. Now this here, as you can see, I'll just bring it up again very quickly. The photograph that you see, there's not actually that much blood. Now, when we say not that much blood, I mean, I've probably had nosebleeds, which have been, more significant on the external than what we see here. But what potentially can cause you a real problem with that is the passage or communication of air into the thoracic cavity, which is, of course, where your heart and lungs are kept. What can happen there is, one or two or combination things known as tension pneumothorax, or tension through the pneumo or air building up inside of, or an overpressure of that building up inside of the lung cavity, or hemothorax, which of course is where you have the blood building up inside that cavity as well, or a combination of the both. So that can cause massive problems. He recognized this, and going through, he recognized this. He went through. He initially rushed off to go and grab his compliance med kit that he had inside the house. He realized that the injury simply wasn't going to be sorted with that, so he went to his car, grabbed his Gucci med kit, and dumped a chest seal on, and then got through to Tauranga Hospital. And when he showed up, they asked him, what was that? And this is something which really makes me concerned, because when we look at penetrating chest trauma, all of the evidence that we see is that using vented chest seals is a really good way to go through and obviously manage a penetrating chest trauma to prevent tension hemothorax or pneumothorax from building up inside that chest cavity. So that one there is quite a unique injury as such. But when we look at civilian chest trauma in general, it's actually higher rates now than what we see in the military. So the military has around about 4 to 6% preventable deaths or injuries resulting in tension pneumo or hemothorax, whereas civilian chest trauma, we're looking at around about 10% of all chest traumas results in the tension pneumothorax. So that's pretty significant and enough definitely to put a couple of chest seals inside. And that's what we see on this guy's chest right there. Basically, the way the chest seal works is that you have 3 sides, in this case here, a hyphen chest seal. You have 3 sides which have got super sticky adhesive on them, okay, which will stick to pretty sweaty skin and stuff like that, blood-soaked skin inside. I mean, it has a piece of gauze inside it you can wipe it away with. And what that does is basically works as the same as a duck spill on the back of a boat, where it doesn't allow water to rush into the boat, but as you accelerate, all the water goes towards the rear of the boat and allows water out. Okay, so that's kind of how it works in principle anyway. So yeah, that was an interesting one that we got sent through, or that we had there as well. And I think it's important to address. Chest seals are a great bit of kit. Sorry,
and jump in. It seems to me that, like, obviously we've got a few examples here where people have whipped out their phone either pretty quickly or at some stage during that, and I wonder, because when this happened, this incident happened, one of the things that, he's had this towel wrapped around his arm for an hour, and then when the first paramedic arrived, he wanted to have a look at it and get an assessment of it and to take a photo of it. And thereby we open it up, and then I think that the bleeding started again when that happened, and of course it was a painful experience for the kid when that happened. So I wonder if, in fact, your initial instinct might be like, oh, I shouldn't take a photo. That seems a bit like not appropriate. But in fact, is it a good idea to take a photo if there's more than one of you, if you've got the time to get a photo that you can then, because obviously if you bandage something up and you wrap it up, maybe it's good to be able to show the paramedic, hey, this is what it is.
Yeah, sweet. So I think it comes down to where you are and what you're doing and stuff like that. I'm not an advocate of taking photographs of footage, and that may seem a little ironic because obviously we're showing a few and stuff like that. Use what you've got. I'm not really a fan of doing that. In just about every incident that I've been involved with, it's always been priorities in terms of managing, managing massive bleeding, managing airways and stuff like that. And I just really haven't had the time to go through and do that. To go through and show the paramedic the injury and stuff, of course, he's going to do his own primary survey. As soon as he shows up on site, he's not going to take your word for it. And that's because even potentially with a tourniquet applied or something like that, he might turn around and be like, no, we're going to remove the TQ or whatever else. Maybe we'll, maybe won't, or maybe they will, maybe they won't, whatever. It is what it is. I'm not going to try and tell them how to do their job. I'm not a paramedic here in NZ or anything like that. And maybe we can get some input if there's any paramedics listening in there. But from my perspective, at least, I would go through and I'd be completely comfortable with them removing the towel and having a look inside. A little bit of pain and whatever else, look, it is what it is. But yeah, definitely, if there is a potential there to take a photograph or whatever else, I just kind of don't see the point in doing that. The injury is what it is, and I don't see the requirement or need for a paramedic to go through and take a photo. Maybe they've got a system that they send back.
He was sending it because the first guy that arrived wasn't actually in a truck. He was just in a car, and so then he was like, okay, right, we need to order a truck. And so he took a photo and I don't know, logged it or whatever.
I mean, that makes perfect sense, and that's that's the only reason that I'd really assume for it. I'd hope that people wouldn't be taking it for their personal stash sort of thing. It is what it is. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I would suggest probably not. Let the professionals do their job. Just remember, at basic life support level, there is two objectives when it comes to first aid, and this is one of the big problems that we see with a lot of the courses, is that there's so much clutter. People are teaching you all about these flash ways to splint arms, or using cardboard, or using magazines, and doing this and doing that. And it's like, gosh, if I had some one-day hero run over to me who had done, a single day or a half-day first aid course and started trying to twist my broken arm back into place and strap it to a piece of cardboard, bro, I'm probably going to get up and fight you. Whereas, going through and understanding the two basic principles of first aid: one, making sure that the person isn't bleeding out; two, making sure that the air is going in and out. That's it. If you've achieved those two things, all the rest is cream, man. You've nailed the two things which are going to knock people off really, really, really quickly. So yeah, that's very, very important to go through and do. So hopefully that addresses the question anyway. Would I take a photo? Personally, no. I don't see the need to do that kind of stuff at all. But yeah, from their principles, I don't know. Maybe we can get something from a paramedic later on. Okay, let's talk about the last example here. And I think this one got sent through to us kind of late, actually. Yeah, it did. It got sent through to us late. And this one here was from somebody who obviously grabbed the question, and it was the person who submitted. Their father had a partial amputation of the hand with a circular saw back in the day. Okay, so this is an interesting one, and viewer discretion advised again. This photograph is actually unrelated, but about as good as we could get in terms of going through and looking at this kind of injury. And this brings up again a couple of points here. Okay, so here we go. Injury here, gnarly one. This is a circular saw incident that we've got here. And as you look at this, I'm not too sure whether this has been tourniqueted already. I don't think it has been, just by looking at the color of the fingertips. It looks like there still is good kind of good communication of blood in and out, and that hasn't been compromised. There's been no circulatory compromise through to the fingertips or anything like that. So we see there, it's a friggin' gnarly injury. I mean, most people, if they saw that, would just be like, whoa, okay, cool. I'm going to hand this over to the next person or whatever else. But that injury there, I mean, I could be wrong with that. I'm not too sure how far through the passage of care or the chain of care this person is. But that kind of injury there, it's very simple. If it's not bleeding so much, then maybe just get them to hold on to a roll bandage or an emergency dressing or whatever else, and just keep their hands squeezed nice and tight. Use the bandage to go through and wrap it up. And if it is bleeding massively, that's a partial amputation, man. TQ mid-forearm, drop it on there. Okay, get it done nice and tight until the bleeding stops, and that's it sorted out. Okay, so that's a very, very kind of good example of, going through, just looking at the injury, making sure you know what you're dealing with, and just applying the appropriate treatment. That's very, very important. For you tradies, I'm guessing you guys probably see quite a few kind of hand injuries and stuff like that on sites and stuff like that. Is that right?
Yeah, I would imagine that maybe one of the most common, and certainly the two things that I fear the most on site, is one, shooting myself with a nail gun, or two, taking a finger off with a skilly or a drop saw because you're holding, you don't realise where you're holding, or I don't know. But I would have guessed that the finger would be. And in fact, someone messaged me and said they had a story about a guy using a table saw back in the day. And also, I'd love to hear if anyone knows what the most common tool is for the like serious injuries on site, because I think table saws are definitely one of the more dangerous ones. And he'd gone through, and I believe the description was he went through from the tip of his pinky, like down to all his fingers off, basically. So yeah, I think fingers must be a not uncommon one to take a finger off.
Yeah, digits, it's quite a hard case, especially working out the steel and stuff like that, and seeing guys, you can tell the boys have been around for a while because they're typically missing a digit and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've definitely worked with guys when I was a young guy, and he was it's going back 20 years, and yeah, he had half a thumb from a skill saw.
Yeah, 110%, man. Okay, so yeah, I can see that as well. So very, very quickly, we're just going to talk about the amputation thing as well, because especially when it comes to digits. Some of the advances with surgery, microsurgery and stuff like that, which is way, way, way outside of my scope, but from my understanding, has advanced hugely over the years now, and there's really good possibilities of reconnection and whatnot with regards to these kind of injuries, especially putting digits back on and stuff like that. So when it comes to that, what we want to do is make sure that we stop the bleed. First of all, you're not going to bleed to death from freaking your pinky finger getting removed or whatever else. Okay, that's not going to be a major issue. Through the thumb, of course, we've got arteries which run through there and whatnot, which can cause a bit of a fright. But you've got to remember the amount of circumferential pressure required to occlude arteries inside the thumb. Direct pressure, or literally wrapping your hand or finger, good hand around that thumb is going to be fine to control that kind of injury. So do we require a TQ? No, probably not. Okay, if it's going to really make the person feel better, then maybe consider mid forearm again. But I wouldn't look at that. I'd simply look at that direct pressure. With that injury I showed before, for those of you who didn't see it, I'll just bring that one up again. For something like that, yeah, I would 100% look at utilizing if that had an arterial bleeding through the deep palmar or palmar arch through the hand there, I would 100% look at using a tourniquet on that mid forearm, drop it on, and just get it done. Simple as that. Wrap it up. Make sure the person's hand isn't flopping all over the show, and getting off to ED where they can go into surgery, obviously after assessment and get fixed up. So yeah, so when we're looking at digits, when we're looking at somebody who's missing a finger or whatever else, what we want to do is stop the bleed first of all, and then B, if we can, recover the item or the amputated body part. And if we can, what we want to go ahead and do is put that inside of, if we've got one, a clean tea towel or a clean piece of cloth, whatever else, and obviously wrap it up. If it's moist, even better. Go through, chuck it inside of a bag, and then put it into an ice box. What we do not want to do is go ahead and put that limb directly against ice cubes, anything like that, because what that's going to do is obviously just destroy any of the cells which come into contact for a prolonged period with the ice. And then when reattachment happens, if it does happen, obviously that tissue is just simply going to die, become gangrenous, and that's just going to have to be removed. So, yeah, don't put it directly against ice. Keep it out of that, okay? And, yeah, just make sure that we go through and, store it as best as we can. Keep it clean, through the hospital. So, yeah, very important to do that. Obviously, sterile plastic bags and stuff like that, those can be added into first aid kits and stuff, and that's pretty important as well. So, yeah, have you got anything to add to that as well, Rich?
To that thing, or just the whole?
No, in general.
Yeah, there's a comment here, and it was something that was also when this incident happened, I realised that having a first aid kit doesn't really cut it. So someone's asked, where should I keep first aid kits on sites that don't get messed up by, I guess, just, you've got 5 builders on site and some people aren't so responsible and maybe it's going to end up a mess. I realised on the day I was racing around looking for my first aid kits and I struggled to remember where they were, and I knew I had them. So one of the things I actually did a long time ago is pack out, which for those who don't know is like a branded tool stacking system. I decided to make my own kit, my own first aid kit that I kept on my pack out. And I remember at the time thinking, I'll do this because I know it'll always be with me on site. It's always going to be with my tools. And similarly to what you were talking about earlier, like you say, you open up a first aid kit and there's just like piles of crap and it's all stacked on top of each other and you don't know. It's not like you sit at home and study your first aid kit and figure out where everything is. And, so I took out and I made a first aid kit, which was basic for what I know I'm most probably going to need on site. So from small plasters right up to big bandages in case it was basically for cuts and stuff, right? And so I knew as soon as I opened it up, it was where it was. So I think for that question, if I was a business owner, having something like that little kit that you've showed up before, something that like everyone's got room on their belt to strap a little pouch that holds a little bit of bandaging or whatever. I think everyone, if you bring on an apprentice, maybe that's one of the first things you buy them. You should have one obviously on your wall, and if that's the one that everyone's going to go to every time they cut their finger or bang their thumb, then maybe it's just going to be a bit of a mess, and you just make it the one that's going to be a bit of a mess. And then you have something that's more serious one, like, boys, don't touch this unless it's serious and it's here. And then you have one in the car, and there's one on the site, and the more there is, the better, is kind of one of the things I really wanted to push. Yeah.
110%, man, and I think that's such a important thing as well, is to go through and understand that what we've done here. We've brought the essentially what is combat medicine through to the civilian sector, and when you look at it, there's no one-stop shop. It's not like you run around. It's not like every single person who's running around the place or has been running around the place for the last 20 years in global war and terror has been carrying a backpack full of stuff good to go. That's just not how it works, because it's not practical. And what you mentioned before, hey, great segue into introducing what we're going to be giving away, what Richard's going to be giving away on our behalf, or what we're donating through to as well. What we're giving away is this little thing here. This is known as a RAK, or a rapid action kit. Inside of this, I'll introduce what it's got very soon, but I need to make sure that you guys understand this bad boy here is made in NZ. So not only are you getting the best piece of equipment that you possibly could be, but you're also supporting Kiwi small business as well. So this is obviously working on a MOLLE system. For those of you who have anything to do with kind of military, tactical, etc., you know what that is. But it can be attached to MOLLE vest. It can also be attached through to a builder's belt harness, whatever else. Basically anything you can do with that. This is soon to be dropped, brand new, soon to be dropped onto people. So basically all it has inside of it, this one here, is to deal with the most common injuries that you're going to see on building sites of a significant nature. So the first thing you got, as soon as you pull it open, is your soft tourniquet. This will be inside of one of these that we send out to you, Richard. Next thing you got, if somebody's got a bleed that they need to manage immediately, which may be a little more or a little less serious, only require bandaging, is of course your 4-inch dressing. So there it is there. And that's your rapid action kit. And that is your first line of defense, or your first line of treatment for anything that you're kind of going to be dealing with. That is our most basic kit that we sell, or that we have sold. That is a new introduction, which is going to be coming out and dropping onto the website. Brand new website coming out very, very, very soon. I've been saying that for a while, but very soon. So we're going to be sending that out to you, and making sure that gets out to people. Now, as you kind of can tell, we've been talking about this a little while, and we've got a few questions in here. And I just want to go through these before we get on to the next tier, or the next stage of things. And one of them here is from Patrick. We've had a few knife cuts and doing building paper, when doing building paper or something like that. And I guess the question comes back to, how do we deal with a knife cut? First of all, have a look at it. Second of all, then you can start looking at this next piece of equipment that we've got going on here. And this is a new, soon to be released piece of equipment. Okay, and this is a bit more heavy duty. This is what is known as a rugged first aid kit, or RFAC. And this one has a little bit more inside of it. Okay, this is where you're starting to look at things like your wound packing gauze. This is when you're starting to look at chest seals. You've got emergency blankets in there. And even if you really want them, okay, what we can do is go through and put in things like your regular dressings, okay, because we understand that you don't want to deploy a Israeli dressing every single time. So I've got a 7.5 centimeter non-adherent dressing here, 7.5 centimeter conforming bandage here, some tape as well on top of that, so you can manage that. And that's for the injuries where you don't need to necessarily rush off to ED or anything like that. You can go through and manage that. So we understand it. I mean, at the end of the day, not every injury that you're going to come across requires an emergency bandage or anything like that, but you've got to have that stuff on you. And when it comes to these kind of injuries, those small things you can do, like applying a TQ if it's required, or applying an emergency dressing, can have so much impact on the outcome of somebody's situation in terms of their A, survivability, and B, of course, their time away from work and everything else like that. So pretty important. We have here as well, that's what we have, Kyle Campbell, awesome. Yeah, that's what we have also. The pack out system is perfect, epic, and it's good to see there. So basically, just to recap that, or just to reiterate what we're saying here, first line should be on you, and that's how we used to deal or roll in the military as well, as you'd have the bare essentials sitting on your body, and that was, again, looking at the evidence which was coming out of the early stages of the global war on terror and what was actually killing people. So those essentials sitting on you are so important. Then from there, your second line which is where you're having, somebody who's, done a little bit more maybe advanced training, 6400 series course or a FET course, can come through and understand how to use, things which are a little more, which require a little bit more training or whatever else. They can go through and start managing casualty there, of course, within their scope of training and confidence and competence. Okay. And then from there, it's real simple, paramedics, and off to hospital you go. So yeah, there it is. But yeah, really, really, really good question there as well. Epic, absolutely epic.
Again, and just going back to what I was saying before, just to finish it off, is that, I'm on Instagram. A lot of obviously I've got followers that follow me on Instagram, and I follow lots of people. And Instagram's, we share lots of information and stuff. But one of the things that's big on Instagram is basically tool porn, right? Like, we're all basically little boys, and we get excited about our tools, and so often there's a tool that you've been drawing over for a while, and you eventually get it, and you're so stoked you got it, and that's awesome. But first aid obviously just doesn't do that for people, right? Like, no one's excited about walking out with a first aid kit. No one's thinking, I can't wait to save up for that like special first aid kit, right? So I think about it like, if you had all your tools in a pile, and something happened to someone next to you, and you needed a TQ, a tourniquet or something like that, and you didn't have it, and I had one, and I said, mate, I'll swap you all your tools for this tourniquet so that you can save his life, you wouldn't even think twice. You wouldn't hesitate for a second. And I don't know, like, what's a TQ? What's that thing that you just held up worth?
These are about $67, and it kind of really segues into the next question as well. And we've got it written down here. It's about longevity of kit and how to store them and stuff like this. This will literally last you forever. Okay, we sell two tourniquets. We've got a cat tourniquet. This is this one here, obviously a bit bigger, a bit bulkier, and stuff like that. Really great piece of kit, don't get me wrong. And then we have the soft tourniquet, this bad boy here. When it comes to these kind of things, and I will address this question right now real quick, is how do products like this, how do products like some of the chemicals and things like concrete dust affect the integrity of the products, e.g. the tourniquet? So well, of course, this is made out of, various different kind of nylons and cotton based materials, and of course plastic and a little bit of steel. And so is this pouch here. And obviously this is not going to protect, all the equipment inside from some of the stuff that you're going to find is going to obviously eat away at it. So maybe looking at other options, basically what it turns into is going through and making sure you've got something which protects from dust, protects from water, whatever else. And that's why we're bringing out the RFAC or rugged first aid kit. That's going to be available as soon as the website drops. Stand by for that. And basically it comes down to solutions or proper carriage solutions. And this is something that I used to see a lot of, and I actually still deal with a lot as well. People ring up or ask me, tourniquet fell out or tourniquet got damaged or whatever else. And it's like, okay, cool. So what are you carrying it in? How are you carrying the tourniquet? Whereabouts is it? And what that turns into is pretty quickly, you need to understand that the person that just simply isn't carrying it in the right or the suitable piece of equipment. Is there any one piece of is there any one piece of equipment which is going to be cover you for everything? Absolutely not. That refers to pouches and stuff like that as well. So make sure that you go through and use a piece of equipment. Think about it before you buy it. Nobody likes buying tons and tons of stuff which is just needless and nebulous. Buy the right piece of equipment which is suited to you. We've got various different sizes of the RFAC coming out. So yeah, stand by and have a look at that as well. So yeah, that's hopefully that kind of addresses that kind of question as well.
I've got one final question, because one of the ways I came across you is because you were running. I was looking for like different courses and stuff, right? And I know that you guys run a serious trauma sort of course, which I think you said is like 4 hours, where you're basically just learning how to control bleeding, that sort of injury. And again, which is probably the most common in terms of construction. You guys are based in Tauranga. Where do you run those courses?
Okay, so we run our courses absolutely anywhere. Obviously, right now we don't run them anywhere, but when lockdown's over and stuff like that, when we're able to move, we run them anywhere. Anywhere a client wants us and stuff like that. And just to address this as well, I just want to make this very, very, very clear to absolutely everybody who's listening. These are simply not advanced trauma courses. We run a basic stop bleed course, and that is the absolute bare minimum that I think is, and what I consider to be the absolute bare minimum for acceptable standard when it comes through for hemorrhage control in NZ, because it's simple. You just, like, right now there's way too much focus on all this stuff which really isn't going to keep somebody alive, and there is such minimum focus on going through and addressing bleeding in a truly pragmatic manner. So there it is. And very quickly, I'm just going to jump in. I think I'm the boss. I think I'm doing okay, but it looks like somebody's just popped up on the live feed here. You can get your soft TQ or genuine emergency bandage from our website. Use the code livestream15, 15% off. You're not going to beat that deal anywhere in this country. That is incredible. So I don't know, I'm going to have to speak to admin after this, but it's somebody's just dropped that right now. I don't know how long that's gonna last. So if you want to jump in and grab one of those limited quantities, go for it. And we have a question here as well. Sorry, Rich, I'm just going to jump in from Anthony Holt. This is a really good question and something that we've addressed a couple of times in the past. So when we go through and send out one of these bad boys here or any of our equipment, what you're going to find is whether you get a rapid action kit, whether you get an IFAS or individual first aid system, critical incident response system, RFAC, whatever else, you're going to find that the tourniquet is inside of a plastic wrapper like this. Okay. That is purely to show you that it is an OEM product and it hasn't been touched, hasn't been used, anything like that. Please pull it out. Okay, so that is the short answer. Please pull it out. The reason is pretty straightforward. This here is quite tough plastic. I've got a brand new cat tourniquet here as well. If we look at this is very hard to remove the plastic from as well, especially when you have blood-soaked hands, blood everywhere, blood is super slippery stuff. Please, please, please remove the tourniquet from its wrapper. As soon as you get that thing in the mail, rip it open, have a look at the stuff inside, pull the tourniquet out of that plastic wrapper. That is only there to show you there's an OEM and untampered product. Okay, it's simple as that. And that is massive. That is so, so important. So thank you very much for the question, Anthony. That was awesome. Rich, did you have anything else?
That pretty much wraps it up from my point of view.
Okay, I remember talking to you just before we kicked off this. There's one more question we've got here, actually. What do you use for cuts that are too big and bloody for a plus, but not enough for a hospital kind of thing? I think we already talked about this a little bit, and that was, your general blade products, you can go through, get your kind of dressings like this. Obviously, we provide and sell them as well, but there's one more that I want to talk about real quick. And that, of course, is to do with people falling from height, spinal injury versus airways. Now, this is really, really, really important, because one of the things that we've noticed kind of coming through a lot of our courses is that people are terrified or really apprehensive about moving people because they're like, oh no, you can't move him, he's got a spinal injury, he might have a spinal injury. Okay, so I'm going to put this in really, really simple terms. If somebody is lying in a position where their airway is compromised, maybe you can hear it because they're sitting there and you can hear, a bit of compromise through the tongue falling onto the back of the throat. Remembering that's a big piece of muscle, 600, 900 grams, about the same size as your fist, just flops back onto the back of the oropharynx or the throat, and you can hear that snoring noise. You need to manage that. I'm not going to teach you how to do that on a Facebook Live or a LinkedIn Live or whatever else. That's just not happening. But you need to know that we need to get airway patency. We need to go through, we need to manage that airway into a position where there is air coming in and out. Remember, the two aims of first aid that you have to worry about massively: one, blood going around and around and around, and that's not just inside the body, that's in circulation. And two, making sure that we have air coming in and out of the body. That is just so important. So if we go through, if we manage the airway, if we manage the neck into a position where we can gain that, look, there is a potential that you could injure the person further, maybe even kill them or whatever else. But at the end of the day, they have a 100% chance of dying from no airway or compromised airway versus a maybe chance of having something happen if they've got a C-spine injury or cervical spinal injury. Just from an anecdotal perspective, I've dealt with 6 spinal injuries now, and 5 out of 6 of them have been screaming and complaining instantaneous midline point tenderness, or basically pain in the neck, pain in the thoracic, wherever else, and they will tell you. Okay, so a big one there is that, is it going to kill somebody real quick? No, it's not. Okay, spinal injury will not kill somebody like that, and if it has, well, it has. Okay, so there is a caveat in that course. But when it comes to managing that spinal, listen to your casualty, slow down, take your time. Is the air going in and out? Yes. Is the blood going around and around? Yes. Okay. If they've got a spinal injury, there is no need to move them. Okay. Listen to your casualty, Okay, just relax. But don't be afraid of moving somebody. But you know what? Learn how to do it properly. That is so important to go through and do. Remember, kit is useless without training. Training is useless without kit, and without the mindset and without the confidence to go through, you're pretty much out of luck. So yeah, there it is. From my end, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I've got as well. Rich, if there's anything that you kind of want to close out with, I mean, hopefully this has kind of brought a few new things to the light with you as well, and kind of got you on board a little further. Yeah.
I mean, like I say, I was lucky that with AJ Hackett we did that pretty heavy duty course, and I was motivated by a mate of mine, Vaughan, and he was doing a course with guys that he worked with, and he was like, hey, do you want to tag on with this course? So I'm glad I got, otherwise, like so many of us, I would have sat around and been like, yeah, I should go on, I need to get a refresher course, I need to, and just never done it, right? So, and he already messaged me once I started doing this, being like, oh, we're doing another refresher course. Yeah, like jump on. So, yeah, this has been awesome, because there has been a number of people being jumped in contact with me through Instagram, being like, man, I've raced out and I've bought this kit and that kit, and thanks for bringing this. Because you need reminding, you need to kick up the ass with first aid, because again, it's not the glorious part, it's the thing that you actually hope you never want to use, so you just kind of hide it in the background and pretend it's not there until it's too late. So
100%.
Yeah,
totally agree. I think we can do so much better in this country with this kind of stuff. I think there's been, for way too long, there's been way too many companies out there getting fat, clipping the ticket, just thinking it's all good to provide very mediocre stuff. And some of the syllabus which is being taught out there is so far out of date. It's like 10, 20 years plus out of date. What's being taught, and that's a disgrace. And very simple, we won't stand for that. We're simply going through and changing the way that Kiwis look at first aid. And so far, in the short time that we've been around and the short time that we've been about, we've had 53 success stories come back through to us. A couple of people have managed things on a couple of instances, and that's real world first aid. That's not putting a sticker on or a plaster on or anything like that. That's going through and managing arterial bleeds or resuscitating people, whatever else. And for me, that's the currency. That's the value. We're values based. We're not profit based. If you guys need a course out there, if you need to know how to do this stuff properly, get in touch with us. We'll manage you. We'll go through. We'll work with you as best as we can. Get in touch with us. We're still working over the lockdown period in terms of all the admin. So it's a great time to reach out and start organising things as soon as we get done.
This is the perfect time. This is when like online sales go up with all sorts of shit, because people are sitting at home twiddling their thumbs a little bit and put that direction a little bit towards some first aid and get some first aid kit.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, we've had two questions which have come in very, very late in the piece, but I'm going to answer them anyway because, hey, 10% extra for free, man, I don't mind doing that. And you'll notice that if, for those of you who have hung around and done a course or two, you'll notice that as well. The first one here, so I've got two of your cat tourniquets. So the soft ones you mentioned, are they better, or are they better for specific bleeds or just comfort? Okay, so soft tourniquet versus cat tourniquet. The soft tourniquet has grown on me massively. That was as advised by a friend of mine, 18 Delta, a former Delta Force medic, special operations over in the States. We talk about tourniquets for over an hour. Jump onto the YouTube, have a look at that. Personally, I think they are actually a better system. Why? Because they're almost impossible to remove from a casualty perspective once they go on. It's as simple as that. So that's very, very important to go through and to have a look at. The next question here is from Karen, and this is an awesome question. This is such a good question. I'm so glad this has been asked. Is there an expiration date on the bandages in the kit? Should you replace them after a certain length of time? Absolutely. So you'll notice the bandage that I just opened up earlier in the piece, that was live. It does have a little kind of box there. You can see the expiration date. Now that expiration date is February 2029. One of the big problems that you have with a lot of places in New Zealand as well is they're going through and they're selling bandages which in some cases have less than 2 to 3 years left on the expiry date. Our bandages, they're as new as you're going to get. They are brand new. Why are they brand new? Because we use them in training as well, which means that we're constantly going through and cycling through our bandages. will simply not sell somebody something which is anything over 24 months outside of its original expiration date. That gets put straight into training. And yeah, it is very important to go through and look at that. The reason why is because some of this equipment does degrade. Some of the glue, some of the fabric, some of the plastics, etc., can degrade over time. So it is important to go through and replace that. An emergency bandage right now with 15% off is going to be like $14 or something, which is $3 more, I think, than kind of your regular roll bandages. So it's an investment, simple as that. But yeah, go through. You should be checking all that kind of stuff. And yeah, man, that's a really good question. So thank you very much, Kieran and Isaiah. Cheers, guys. Much appreciated. Thank you for joining us, man. We've had really good engagement on this little kind of chat that we've had today here, Richard, and hopefully that kind of leads to the conversation changing about the way that Kiwis do first aid, because, yep, we need to create more responders instead of simply having people running around the paces.
Turning bystanders into responders is a nice
man.
Yeah, you feel good when you can respond.
Yeah. 110%, man. So, yeah, to everybody watching out there, this is going to be up on the YouTube channel on PracMed. So that's going to be available. We'll put it through on the Facebook link as well and stuff like that. Thank you so much for all the questions. It's always good to have people coming through and dropping that on. And yeah, do appreciate everybody's time this afternoon. But if there's nothing else from you, Richard, that's pretty much me.
Thanks everyone for watching, and yeah, hopefully you've all learned something. Thanks, awesome. Simon. Man, I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Cheers, team. Thank you. Catch ya.